What you're looking at is an MPC 3000. It sits in a room amongst the most iconic relics of our country's musical history. And that room is on the 4th floor of the National Museum of African American History in our nation's capital. That MPC was owned by Dilla, who composed some of the most revered beats in hip-hop history.
Technology has just taken a giant leap forward. Hello, I'm Roger Lynn, and this is the MPC 60 MIDI Production Center, created by myself and Akai Professional.
The MPC is this compact machine that's a holding station for all types of samples, which you can play with 16 touch-sensitive pads. The very first model shipped in 1988 for just a few $1,000s, and it was Akai and Roger Lynn's elaboration on the Lynn drum machine. The concept, though, of taking samples of pre-recorded sound and composing with them existed long before the late 1980s, but those machines were limited by their price and portability.
The MPC was a different beast because it really puts you in the driver's seat in terms of sonic texture that you wanted to have.
That's Brian Radar Ellis, and that's his MPC Renaissance.
You know, really just make a mess of it. It's a fully customizable machine, whereas you look at maybe like the Lynn drum or the Roland TR-808, which were specifically drum machines, the sounds came preloaded and you couldn't change them.
In short, the MPC 60 was the musical brain of the studio. By 1994, when Akai introduced the MPC 3000, it was the tool of choice for many of the top hip-hop producers in the game, including Dilla.
I think the thing with Dilla that inspired so many producers is that he was able to use such a wide vocabulary of technique.
Dilla was a producer out of Detroit in the mid-90s through his early death in 2006 from a rare blood disease. He passed away just 3 days after releasing one of his most fascinating and beloved albums, Donuts. He worked with an astounding list of iconic artists and pulled off the majority of his sound with just a few simple instruments, machines, and samplers, one of them being the MPC.
He knew how to get into every piece of the MPC and use it to a musical advantage.
So let's talk about Dilla's drum style first.
He figured out how to humanize the drum machine by avoiding certain things that he could have done to make it more robotic, make it more stiff.
For instance, the MPC has this incredibly useful tool called quantization.
What quantizing does is it takes your performance. Let's say I'm playing my drum pattern. And when I'm playing it, sometimes it's a little ahead, it's a little bit behind.
If your kick drums are off by a little bit, quantization snaps them in place.
And so a lot of producers, they use quantize, not as a crutch, but they just weren't thinking about not using it. And so Dilla was like, yeah, I'm just gonna turn this off.
The result is a discography full of incredibly off-kilter drums. This loose drumming style was incredibly influential. When Red Bull Music Academy interviewed Questlove, he said Dilla's drumming technique single-handedly changed how he played.
Whereas this part is normal, it sounded like the kick drum was played by like a drunk 3-year-old. I was like, are you allowed to do that? So it's like, that to me was the most liberating moment.
Dilla was known for his signature low-end texture, and his drums accounted for a lot of that sound. Here's just a regular sampled kick. Here's what that same kick with the high-end cutout sounds like. You'll hear that kick in a lot of Dilla beats, like on The Far Side's Runnin'. The other half of Dilla's low end came from his bass lines.
He had a way of kind of getting the fuzz and the bump out of a bass line.
The MPC gave Dilla the flexibility to create and manipulate his bass in a lot of different ways.
Dilla didn't just, drop out of nowhere and just know how to do everything all at once. He was listening to a lot of the legends. In fact, producers like Large Professor, they use this technique a lot to get extra mileage out of a sample. So right now I got this loop. This is Gap Mangione. Diana and the Autumn Wind